Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being called a piece of ship. This week, we are going to talk about explosions and something Star Wars actually got right. That's terrifying now that I think about it. I mean, Star Wars plays fast and loose even with their own rules, but they actually got something fairly correct in a fairly actual physics kind of way. Which is kind of shocking, given everything else we've said about Star Wars on this particular channel, right? But, anyways, explosions. Explosions are pretty awesome, right? I mean, they can be pretty, they can be destructive, which is awesome when you want to destroy things. They can accomplish all sorts of things, including f*** up your day, and if the explosion goes off when you don't want the explosion to go off, or if the explosion goes off somewhere you don't want the explosion to go off. They're finicky that way. In fact, on your planet, your ammunition bunkers are typically designed to actually direct the blast if the ammunition inside of that bunker goes off. Because typically these bunkers are in fields and fields of bunkers, and if one goes pop, you don't want the rest to go pop too, because, well, one, that would be expensive, and two, you probably didn't need a new crater there. A lot of bunkers on your planet, ammo bunkers that is, outside of combat areas, are specifically designed to direct the blast out the doors, oddly enough. But that's why they offset the bunkers in the field, so that if one disgorges its contents out of its front, it doesn't really hit anything aside from the back of the bunker across the line from it, across the line from that one too. You get what I'm saying. Now, if you don't want the blast to go all the way out the front door, you put up what's called a blast barricade. Think of this as a very large wall that has an earthen reinforcement behind it. So if that explosion comes out of that front door, it'll hit that wall and then direct out the sides and up, and not just turn the bunker into a very fixed rocket, basically. In fact, your species has come up with all sorts of ways of dealing with explosives that they don't necessarily want to explode where they were, or they can't figure out another way of disposing of them. There's this adorable little, like, 55-gallon drum-looking thing that you're supposed to be able to set off, like, package bombs in. And it contains the explosion from going out and mostly just directs it up. There's even a trash can variant of it, which is a terrifying concept. You have humies wandering around dropping bombs in trash cans. That's exciting. But this, ironically, is what Star Wars actually got right. So to back up and talk about Star Wars a little, instead of explosives and bunkers and so forth and so on, imagine you're some freighter captain making the long haul through the Outer Rim, and you come across some backwater planet, say Tatooine, and you want to set down and, I don't know, shore leave, do a little trade, blah, 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 refuel, fix some janky-ass component that just keeps fucking breaking, whatever the reason is, fine. You call up Mos Eisley Tower and say, hey, I'm in a YT whatever the fuck, I need to land. What do you got? And Control Tower says, sorry, the landing pads that can accommodate a ship of that size are currently full. F*** off. And then while you're wondering why Mos Eisley doesn't have a proper, landing platform, landing strip like Central Core planets do, that janky-ass fucking component that just never seems to work finally shorts out completely, your reactor goes critical, and you explode in space. Well, probably should have paid your last maintenance bill, right? And that, right there, is why Star Wars actually got this right. If you remember your original trilogy, or whatever just happened in the first season of The Mandalorian, you'll remember that almost all of the landing pads in Mos Eisley are in these weird cylindrical structures. The ships come in and land in this big tube, and they stay there their entire time. Seems kind of like a pain in the ass, right? I mean, an open flight deck makes it so much easier to load and unload your cargo, do repairs, and it can accommodate ships of all shapes and sizes, whereas these cylindrical structures have obvious limits. But that's not really why they're there. They're there because these backwater planets are visited by backwater ships, piloted by backwater captains who haven't paid their fucking maintenance bills and have janky-ass components shorting out their drives and exploding their reactors. Now, I don't know if Mos Eisley was always this way. I haven't even bothered to look up the history. But the reality is that the landing pads in Mos Eisley are in the city. That makes a certain degree of sense. I mean, it's convenient, if nothing else, right? But the problem is, if you don't put the ship in a blast-directing bunker and something goes wrong and it goes pop, you just took out like a quarter of Mos Eisley. I mean, no great loss there, I suppose, but still, someone's going to get cranky about that. So instead, they drop them into these, yes, blast-directing cylinder things. And yeah, I mean, the cylinders have like storage compartments on the inside of them and possibly even like residential space and this, that, and the other, but it's still contained. Yeah, if landing pad, what was it, 35 or whatever, suddenly exploded, we'd lose Pelimoto, and that would be very, very sad. But we wouldn't lose the rest of the city. And that's just shocking to me that someone actually thought about this degree of control in Star Wars. I mean, really, of all the things to get right, you went with blast deflectors? Huh. And what's shocking is this isn't actually limited exclusively to Tatooine. Another Outer Rim planet, Ord Mantell, has basically the same kind of structure as you can see in one of the Bad Batch episodes. The landing pads are in the city, and they don't want to lose the city in case some ship has some problem, so they drop them into these cylinders again. It's consistent across the Outer Rim planets. I mean, yes, there are always those places where you just park on the edge of the city and you call it done, but I'm not sure I would actually call those cities, really. And then to actually relate this to the city of all cities, Coruscant actually does something a little similar, but not nearly as obvious. If you remember your prequel trilogy, you'll remember that the Nabooian shuttle lands on this hovering platform. And the passengers get off, and they get on this little shuttle doohickey, and they fly off to wherever the heck they're going. Well, yeah, that's why. I mean, Coruscant understands that this is the Nabooian Queen shuttle, and it is almost certainly in good operating condition and not likely to explode, but we still have no reason to trust you. We're not going to let you land in one of the landing pads or bays that are built into one of the structures of the actual city. So we're going to stick you out on this pad, and if things go wrong, which of course they actually did, but not because of the shuttle itself, then it's contained, or at least further away from the rest of the city. It's contained by distance, I suppose. And then to kind of find a middle ground, Cloud City has its landing pads on these little like catwalks sticking out from the city. I mean, obviously you couldn't do one of those like blast container cylinders thingies on Cloud City, given it is literally a flying city, but you still remove the random ships from the city proper. All the vehicles that are like housed at the city and maintained by the city and operated by the city undoubtedly have internal hangars and bays and whatnot for maintenance and storing and for handing off the Tabana gas and so on and so forth. But y'all fucking strangers and weirdos, yeah, you go park out there. And if something goes wrong, you out there. And yeah, this is actually in stark contrast to military or governmental vehicles and vessels. I mean, for fuck's sake, on Yavin 4, the rebellion actually stored even their freighters underneath the temples that they were building their bases in. Their actual freighters were stored underneath those pyramid things. And yeah, on Naboo, they have these glorious, beautiful architectural hangars where all of their fighters live. Well, in both cases, those are official craft. I mean, the governments know those craft. They know that they've been maintained by governmental standards, whatever that might be, but they still trust that it's been done, as opposed to some random boat coming in out of nowhere and requesting permission to land. You ain't going to shove it underneath the temple. You're going to tell it to park out in the forest. And the same thing with Coruscant even. Those little like bus shuttle things have landing pads and docks that they just come in and out of without even paying attention to any kind of traffic control that is apparent. And it doesn't matter because, again, they are housed on the planet. They have to pass all these certifications. They have to pay all these taxes, I feel certain. And the government of Coruscant believes that they're not just going to randomly blow up on the dock. As opposed to random space freighters. Well, fuck knows, man. Which brings us back to the Outer Rim again. Because all there is out there is fuck knows, man. You got randos doing all kinds of rando shit. They're hot-rodding Nabooian starfighters and doing whatever else with YT-1300s and this, that, and the fucking other. I wouldn't want them parking in my backyard unless I had some sort of, containment system around them. And I mean, again, outer rim, it's not like they can set up a force field bubble over the landing pad or anything. They certainly don't have that spare energy laying around, much less the force field emitters. So they literally built open-topped bunkers for the ships to land in. Yes, I will freely admit that I give Star Wars a lot of grief, mostly because it's easy, but also because they deserve it, because so much of that stuff is absolutely ridiculous, if not outright wrong. See Radiators. But in this case, it actually makes sense. And I'm just astonished that this is what they decided to make sense on. Of all the unimportant things to care about, you went with landing pads. Okay. And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the docks for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Have a nice day.